Shannon here, animal sensitive and intuitive, Reiki master practitioner, animal communication teacher, and most importantly, your friendly neighborhood hostess, along with my precious feathered co host, Petal Cuts, for the Let's Talk to Animals podcast. And today, what I really want to talk with you about is something that we all struggle with universally as pet parents, as animal carers, as guardians of the non human beings that we share this planet with. And this is regardless of whether or not you have awareness of animal communication or not. Although, for our purposes here, of course, considering that you're listening to a podcast called Let's Talk to Animals, a podcast all species can enjoy together, and that so many of the episodes have the words animal communication in the titles, I'm going to assume that you are somewhat familiar. However, I am aware that many people that listen to Let's Talk to Animals, you worry or you wonder, or you're curious about whether or not you've had any direct experiences of animal communication, whether or not your own pets truly are trying to talk with you. In fact, here's an easy example from my one-to-one clients, my pet parent clients. Every week I do sessions for pets here and in spirit. And it is not uncommon for me to hear two things during the typical pet parent session. One of which is, I just feel like my pet is trying to tell me something, but I cannot seem to figure out what it is. The other thing is, if I share something that an animal has told me to pass along to their pet parent, that pet parent will then say, I knew they were going to say that, or I knew they wanted that, or I knew they didn't like that. And let me just tell you, I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form to diminish your intuitive capacities, because for many, many years, if you're at all familiar with my personal story, if you have listened to the recent episode I did on how I became a professional animal communicator and all of the serendipitous steps and experiences that led up to that, then you are very familiar with the fact that for many, many years, decades really, before I became an animal communicator, hung out a shingle and started helping other pet parents with their companion animals, I hired animal communicators. That is what I did. I didn't think I could do it. I didn't trust myself. And so I asked communicators to help me talk with my interspecies family. So I have had these experiences so many times myself where a communicator would say to me, your animal wants this, or your animal doesn't like that, or your animal is frustrated by this, or your animal is feeling that way. And I would say, I knew it. And out of all of the communication experiences that I did have, I would say there were only a handful of which, if you're watching the video version, you can tell that my cockatiel Petal is very intent on getting to the laptop keyboard and the crispy microphone cables that she just loves to chew on. I only remember one communicator one time saying to me, you can do this too, Shannon. So the missing piece for me, and if this has been a missing piece for you, please do allow me to correct that and be the voice for you to say, you know what? Not only can you do this, but you are probably already doing it. One of the key ways to know for sure is if you are drawn to animal communication. And if you do have specific or even repetitive questions, or maybe you'll have a specific issue and that is what's driving you to schedule your session, and you just have a vibe about something, or an instinct about something, or a gut intuition about something. And you just need a little backup. You need a little support. You need maybe a more objective set of eyes and ears to weigh in on whatever it is that you feel like you're detecting or picking up or curious about or wondering about. And so that's really my role. That's where I often in the past have invited, and still do sometimes when I get stuck, because of course we can get too close to a situation. We can get too close to a being. We can get too close to a problem or an obstacle or a challenge. And it is so game changing to have support. to have somebody in our corner who will come alongside us and say, well, let me just check. Let me have a conversation. Let me ask the question, or maybe let's brainstorm together. I do this a lot with my pet parent clients where we brainstorm the questions together. Maybe they'll come to me. Here's a great example of this. They will come to me and they will say, I feel like my animal is really anxious and I just can't find the right thing to offer them that will ease their anxiety. And so we will workshop this together. Because as someone objective, I've never met the animal before. I have not witnessed whatever it is that they are talking about, that they are saying is anxious behavior or anxious mannerisms or habits. So I will say to them, tell me about what you're seeing. Describe what your pet is doing. And then I will ask your animal about that. Well, just for the sake of argument, just to kind of get the cleanest possible slate, let's remove the label anxious or aggressive or fearful or reactive or whatever it may be, because it's so normal and natural. Our brains want to label things, especially the left brain mind is wired into the sympathetic nervous system. Now, that is not something you are going to read in brain biology books. This is a different system. I'm talking about your intuitive anatomy, not your biological anatomy, which will tell you that just the opposite is the case. But intuitively speaking, your left brain mind function is wired into the fight or flight because its job description is to receive data or information from your fight or flight system that says run or stay put, dangerous, not dangerous. And so we can't really turn off, at least subconsciously, unconsciously, we're not going to be able to stop our left brain mind from assigning labels. Joyful, sad, fearful, happy. This is why when I start my animal communication students inside my animal communication adventure learning program, one of the first things that we talk about and that they learn about is how to use the pairs of opposites. Again, because we need to kind of get a sense of where we are on this spectrum from one extreme to the other. However, when we're having a conversation and we have pre-labeled something we're seeing as perhaps aggressive, anxious, fearful, avoidant, whatever it may be, I just want to ask that animal about, why do you do this thing that you do? What's going on? Sometimes we find out it is actually aggressive or anxious behavior or whatever it is. Sometimes we find out it's absolutely not connected to those labels at all. Perhaps the animal is hungry. They're not able to digest their food. Maybe they're in pain. Maybe they're being bullied. Maybe there is an old trauma pattern that's unresolved. Maybe they're bored. There are so many different reasons, all of these and so many more that I can't even begin to dream up here in the moment, that an animal might exhibit a particular behavior. And so it's really important to find out why. And so this is another area where when a pet parent comes to me and they want to have a session, sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I didn't think it was anxiety, but I didn't know what else to call it. And that's why I'm coming to you. That's why I want to have this conversation with my animals, because my spidey sense or my vibes or whatever you're talking about is saying my pet actually isn't reactive or isn't aggressive. That's not their essential nature. But I don't know what else to call it. Maybe they've never seen that kind of behavior before. For me, when we adopted our dachshund, who's now 9, we had no idea at the time that he'd had tremendous birth and puppyhood trauma before we met him. And so when he came to us and he didn't seem to want to play and he wasn't affectionate and he would get strangely aggressive at times. And I cannot tell you how many different protocols and modalities that I have used to help Flash open up, feel more trusting, just of life in general. I worked with him with Reiki, with animal communication. I brought in other practitioners to help with holistic supplements, and we now have him on fresh foods, and he gets acupuncture and chiropractic, and we've done emotion code and body code with him and tapping and all kinds of wonderful, wonderful disciplines. We have essential oils that we use with him. So there's so many different things, but it all starts by having a clear understanding of feeling that gut level, ah, yes, this is it. And so often this back and forth conversation that I have with the pet parent, we're really, and most of my clients probably don't pick up on this, but we're really tuning into their animal together. We're both communicating. And what's so interesting, kind of the subtext of this communication, is that you, as the pet parent, regardless of whether you're having an animal communication or you're just going about your day, your animal is always tuning in with you. You are always communicating with your animal because they are vibing with your energy, what I call your energetic fingerprint or your energetic signature, which is how your animal can tell you from all the other humans on this planet, how you can tell. Like sometimes I would go to pick up my cockatiel Pearl when he was boarding at our neighbors. I'd come home from a trip and he had so many parrots and so many birds, but I could always pick out my Pearl's chirp. Even from outside the house, that is the energetic signature of your particular companion animal. We all have one. They're like, if you think of it like the snowflake of conscious beings. You have one. I have one. Petal cockatiel behind me here on the chair has one. Flash has one. My tortoise, my box turtle, the wild doves outside. Each dove has a unique energetic signature. And your pet is tuning in with me to have a conversation during our sessions, but they're also tuning in with you throughout. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you sign your pet up for an animal communication session, but you're not really open to it, or you're really skeptical, or you've decided that you're not going to get anything, or you've had a bad experience with another communicator and you bring that energy of fear or doubt or avoidance into the session, your animal who is tuning in with you is going to feel that energy and they are not going to be as open with me. Typically, when I really struggle, and it doesn't happen a lot, especially the more I do it in this new expanded open environment where I'm getting so many more pet parent clients who have never worked with an animal intuitive before. And it is so much fun for me. I always feel so honored and so happy to be the one who gets to share this beautiful world of deeper connection with a pet parent. Of course, their animal's already very aware of it. And I always believe that when I am ready to open up a new bank of sessions, I always put the intuitive call out to the pets. I say, bring me your people, bring me your pet parents, bring me your human carers. Who's ready to experience animal communication? Who is open to it? And the pets bring their people to me to have a session, which is really fun. So I don't get this a lot, but when I do, and I have an animal who maybe they're initially open, but then I just get a string of really nonsensical information from them, or I find it's really hard to translate what I'm receiving from them for their person, or their person doesn't understand what their animal's trying to share, or there just seems to be a mismatch of personalities somewhere. It's often because the pet parent is closed intuitively. They are not open. They are not trusting. Probably the better way to put it is they're not really willing to give it a chance. Like any other discipline, including the medical field and science, scientific research, there is always a margin for error. And we express that in different ways. Like research scientists express that with numbers and statistics. Medical doctors express that through writing white papers and sharing what they've learned and comparing case studies. Intuitives, we express that by dialogue with the pet parents, asking, does this make sense? Is this resonating with you? Does this line up with your own intuition or how you experience your animal? And most importantly, we express it through testimonials and reviews after the fact. Did the conversation make a positive difference in your animal's life, in your bond, in your relationship, in your confidence as a pet parent? And so there are so many different ways to measure the validity of the information that is received and the impact that the conversation itself has had in your family. But there's always a margin for error. There's always the chance for mistranslation, especially because, and I love to share this story, it's a perfect example of what can happen. When I was in class with one of my animal communication teachers, and this was me as a student, we were sharing stories, and our teacher told us the story of the time she did a session, a communication with a yellow Labrador. And she asked this yellow lab by way of verification, making sure that she's tuned in with the right animal and that that animal's parent believed that she was tuned in with her dog. So she said, "What is your favorite toy?" And the dog said, "A yellow bird." Being a lifelong bird lover myself and being the pet parent to a yellow bird, I was like, "Oh my goodness." And the pet parent was like, "Oh my goodness, I would never give my dog a yellow bird to play with." And she said, that doesn't make any sense to me." And the session concluded, and it took some time for her. She was out in the park one day playing with her dog and throwing the bright yellow tennis ball that he loved to run and fetch. And she was watching this tennis ball flying through the air, and she thought, oh my goodness, it's the yellow bird. So, of course, there's always the potential for errors in translation because the animal is going to have to find some kind of reference, some frame of reference to send us information that will land with us, that will make sense for us. And he doesn't necessarily know the word for tennis ball. Yes, our animals make all kinds of associations and they do learn a great number of our words over time, including, and this is the most obvious example, their own names. But they're really paying a lot more attention to the energy that accompanies those words. And so they might not always associate the ball with that round yellow thing they love, but they understand that birds fly in the air, they are fast, some of them are yellow colored, and we also understand that. So that is a perfect example of an error of translation. And that is where we, as animal communicators, as well as pet parents, we're always checking, rechecking. We're always asking the pet parent client, does this make sense to you? We are always going back to the animal if it doesn't, asking for more information or shopping a question to see if we can ask it a different way to get more clarity on what is going on. And yet, there are many pet parents who, for whatever reason, they just don't feel like they're able to receive any direct messages from their animals. And I was this pet parent for so many years. First of all, because I was really busy working on other projects. I spent 10 years before I became an animal intuitive working as a professional full-time freelance writer. And for several of those years, I was also running the charity I had founded. We were an online charity. We were in 42 countries. It was a full-time volunteer job for me. So I was very busy. And so when things would come up with my animals, I really didn't have the capacity, the attention span, the energy, or the focus to drop what I was doing and learn animal communication so I could talk to my animals. Plus, I didn't really believe that it was possible. I really believed that only quote unquote special people who were born with it, who were born with a special gift, were able to do this work. So for me, as I share in the episode about my personal story and how it worked, the animals actually had to come to me one day and actually flat out tell me that I could do this. It wasn't even enough to hear it from the animal communicator I was working with at the time. I needed to hear it directly internally from the spirit of the animals. And that was what really got my attention and set me on this path that I am on today. But not everybody is called to work in the field as a professional, to hang out a shingle, to facilitate conversations for others, interspecies families. And that is absolutely fine. But that does not mean that your animal is not talking to you all day, every day. Of course they are. You are their world. You're the most important being in their life, which is why if you come into an animal communication session and you're not 100% on board, you're not at least cautiously optimistic, you are not open and willing, wondering and curious about what might unfold, what might you learn during this conversation. Not, oh, is the communicator going to verify everything I think I know about my animal, but let me at least be open and willing to try on some new perspectives, some new ideas, some new information for size. So if you're not open to it, at least open to it, you're probably not going to receive any kind of verification that it's actually happening. However, that is one of the reasons why I felt called to start Let's Talk to Animals, because we are living in a time period. This is the age of intuition. We are being invited to wake up, to open up. We are finally living in a time, in a culture, at least many of us are, where it is safe to talk about intuition, about vibes, about spidey sense, about gut level feelings openly without fear of reprisal. In fact, this is kind of a funny aside, but one of my earliest business mentors once used to joke. She often liked to joke that we intuitive souls are just all the witches that were burned at the stake in past centuries, and we've come to exact our revenge. Now, I don't necessarily ascribe to that point of view, but I do think that there is a fear factor component, some preconditioning that we bring into this lifetime with us from other incarnations where it wasn't safe to be who we are. It wasn't safe to express what we knew intuitively. It wasn't okay. It wasn't welcome. It wasn't well received. But today, in most parts of the world at least, it is more often than not safe and even welcomed. It's an area of real curiosity and interest for many people. And so we're living in a different world today. I'm 53 this year, and I don't remember ever hearing words like psychic or intuitive growing up. So I did come through a time period where I didn't want to let anyone know that I meditated or did yoga, even though I have been practicing yoga and meditation since I was 19. So that's 30 something years. And I remember, especially being born here in the deep South and being raised lightly Christian as a Methodist, I remember hiding the fact that I meditated and did yoga from the people I knew that were strict Christians because they were threatened by it. They questioned my faith. And that got me to question my faith too, because I thought this makes me feel better than anything else. It makes me a kinder, more empathic, more balanced, more centered, calmer human. And that feels very much in alignment with the way that I want to live my life and the kind of being that I want to be. And so I just share all that to let you know that if you, like me, are a little more seasoned, if you will, and have been through those kinds of times, it's very different now. And it's a much more open environment. And I see this with my clients, pet parent clients of all ages, of all generations who are coming to me, many for the first time, as I shared earlier, because there is this newfound openness. Because, yeah, okay, it's still woo woo, but it's not as woo woo. And they're talking about it with friends. They're hearing about it on social media. They're reading articles or watching Netflix series about these kinds of topics. And so there is that implicit permission there, that newly open door to try it on for size and see how it fits. So understand that your animal is communicating with you. And we're going to do a whole separate episode on kind of what to do and how to work through the doubts that you may feel, especially if you are a student, whether of mine or a different program, and you are encountering doubts or what feel like limitations in your ability to tune in and receive information, and how to work through them, and some ways to really work with your left brain mind to create a friendlier internal environment to receive intuitive information with confidence and clarity, which is really the goal. At least when I run an animal communication student program, that is always my goal, to help you befriend all levels of you, all aspects of your intuitive anatomy as well as your physiognomy, so that you can receive and send animal messages with confidence and clarity. But for now, what I want you to know is that it has happened more times than I can count, and definitely too many times to be some random statistical coincidence, that pet parent clients in session with me will say, I knew my animal was going to say that, or I knew that about my animal. And that to me is just one more level of confirmation that your animal truly is communicating with you. Your animal truly is sending you messages all the time. And so, where I want to kind of wrap up today's episode is with an invitation to you to start to tune in and start to notice themes in your day with your animal. Start to ask yourself, for instance, when you suddenly get an idea that your pet maybe needs to go out or wants a shower or a bath, or is hungry, or is bored, or wants a treat, or you're kind of marking these kinds of routine occurrences in your day. And this is especially fun to do when there's kind of a time range. It's like, well, my animal usually gets hungry between 4 and 6, or when my animal wants to have a bath. Petal, my cockatiel, often likes to have a bath in the morning. It's a very refreshing thing for her to do before she starts preening her feathers. Every single feather, every single day is kind of her motto in terms of grooming and self care. And so she really likes to have a bath in the morning, but not every day. And so that's an example of something where I'm always kind of tuning into my intuition and asking myself, but really tuning in with her and asking her, would you like to have a bath today? Would you like to have a bath this morning? And seeing what unfolds. And so you can just start playing with this. And before long, you may discover that you're not really sure whether you were thinking that because it's 2 o'clock and your dog always likes to have a snack at 2 o'clock, or if the idea just came to you, which is a perfect example of your animal communicating with you. Sometimes these communications are so subtle that you think it's your idea, when really you received a communication from your animal. And it's like the mailman came and just slipped a little letter in the mail slot in your front door. How did that get there? And you can think that in terms of your thought, oh, I think my dog wants to take a walk now. And you're like, did you think that because of some kind of regular daily routine that you have? Or did your dog slip that little memo in your internal mail slot and you received it, and without realizing it, you owned it as something your mind cooked up, but it's really coming from your dog? So, this is something really fun to play with as you go about your day and you start noticing all of a sudden. This is something I do with my tortoise, Malty, who lives outside about 85% of the time, but she knows when she's hungry that she can just come to the back door. She can walk up the ramp and wait by the dog door. And I will come and open the door. She walks in and I fix her plate. So often, I will find myself getting out of my chair and just going to the back door and opening it, and she will be there. And because I'm an animal communicator now, I no longer doubt who sent whom the message. But in my pre animal communication days, because she's 10 now, so we've been doing this routine for a while, I used to always think it was me. It was my mind coming up with the idea. Oh, let me go check for Malty. Now, there have been so many times it's happened where I literally have been like working away at my laptop or doing something in another part of the house, and somehow my feet just started walking in the direction of the back door. And I opened it. The most dramatic example of that was last week we had a really epic storm roll in, like to the point where we made international news headlines, and we had two tornadoes and this crazy windstorm, and we'd lost power for like a week. And right as that storm was rolling in, and I kid you not, it was like about 2 minutes before it full on hit us and our umbrellas fell over and this crazy windstorm blew through, Malty came marching out from her mud wallow where she likes to stay, came very purposefully striding across the lawn, up the dog ramp, and into the house. And I had just spontaneously gone to the door, and here she comes marching in. I had no idea that this storm was about to hit us. She knew, but I had received her memo saying, "Mom, come to the door and let me in." But it was all subconscious because I am so movable now, because I am so open. And my channel for listening to each one of my animals is always open and the volumes turned up to high for my personal animals. So they know they can call me at any time and I will come, whether my conscious mind is aware of it or is tuned into the specific message I'm getting or who I'm getting it from. I am so movable now that I will simply present myself to whomever needs me for whatever is needed. And so that is one of your homework assignments today, is to start tuning in. How did I end up suddenly just walking over and grabbing the leash, or just getting up from my desk and going to find my cat and giving her a pet, or changing my afternoon plans and going to the stable to be with my horse only to discover that he really needed something from me? How do these things happen? Is it all my idea, or is my animal sending me messages? And here's part two. And this is actually an assignment from my free intuitive pet parenting mini course. So if you enjoy this one, you will definitely want to head over to animallovelanguages.com, head over to resources tab right at the top, click on free tools, and you can find the intuitive pet parenting free mini course. But this is one of the fun assignments that you will find inside, to notice when you're coming back home after you've been gone, to notice before you go to the front door, the back door, or wherever you normally enter the house, try to identify where is your animal in the house. Especially, this is obviously more effective if they are free range, if they're not confined. Like my petal is usually in her big cage in the bedroom, so I know where she is. But I can still ask myself what area, because she's got a pretty big indoor casa or cage. So I can still ask myself, where in that large indoor kind of a aviary type cage is she? But if your pet is free range, and especially if they're allowed to go in and out like our dog is through the dog door, are they in the house? Are they in the yard? What part of the yard are they in? Start to sense for their energetic signature and ask yourself, where is my animal in the house? Feel for where they are before you go in, especially if your pet is the kind that likes to meet you at the door. Ask yourself, I do this a lot with my tortoise in the backyard because we have a pretty big backyard, at least when you've got a tortoise who only weighs 10 pounds. And so there was a lot of areas she could be in. So when I'm going to look for her, I'm asking myself intuitively, where in the yard is she? And I'm noticing which direction my body turns. This is kind of an example of very subtle applied kinesiology or muscle testing, if you're familiar, where you stand up and you do the yes no test. And if your body leans, usually it's forward is a yes and back is a no, but it might be different for you. Some people lean to one side or the other. So it's just getting to know your own system of what feels true for you. But start playing with this. And if you do try either one of these homework assignments, either noticing when messages come in or you feel moved to do something for your animal, noticing where did that instinct or idea come from, or being able to kind of spot your pet's energetic signature in your home or yard before you actually get inside and verify that with your eyes and ears, your outer facing eyes and ears. If you try either or both of these homework assignments, let me know how it goes. I would love to hear what you experience. And if you get a little bit closer to feeling like you actually are more intuitive than you think you are, than your left brain mind thinks that you are. And that is really important to recognize because your left brain mind does have a very vital function in the animal communication process. And I talk about that a lot more inside my Animal Communication Adventure student program. But your left brain mind is not intuitive. That is not how it's designed to work. That is not one of its functions or job descriptions, if you will. And so often it is our left brain mind that says things to us like, you're not intuitive, when really what it's saying is, I'm not intuitive. It's saying, I am not wired for the intuitive side of your sensory system. So we take it personally and we say, oh, I think that I'm not an intuitive person. And in reality, it's your left brain mind thinking I'm not intuitive because it isn't. So start trying this on for size. Start allowing yourself to play with the idea. Just wonder, notice, get curious, and use these two homework assignments or fun interspecies enrichment activities, if you prefer to look at it that way, to try on the idea of an intuitive you for size. And if you want to pursue that further, under that same resources tab at animallovelanguages.com, you will find another free mini class called Intuitive You. And this is really the precursor to the intuitive pet parenting mini course that I mentioned earlier. And it's really going to help and encourage you further to explore. Are you perhaps much more intuitive than you're giving yourself credit for? So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk to Animals, the podcast all species can enjoy together. If you have a favorite episode, please do let me know. If you have questions, something you'd like to hear about in a future episode, I'd love to hear that too. Please do take the time to give this podcast your review, your comments, share it with a friend. All of these things really help us to kind of claim and grow our little corner of the greater podcastosphere. Plus, it inspires and encourages me to keep making fresh new episodes for you. And I love to hear from my fellow pet parents about what you're interested in, the challenges that you're going through, the ways that your pet is teaching you and guiding you along your own intuitive journey. So I look forward to welcoming you back in 2 weeks for a fresh new episode here at Let's Talk to Animals. And until then, I'm sending you and your interspecies family all of my love. Okay, bye for now.